Hello, everybody. It's really nice to be here. My name is Erin Harkey. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events in Chicago. And today is actually a really special day for me. This is the one-year anniversary of me being in this role. I've been with the department for 6 years, but was officially appointed by Mayor Lori Lightfoot and approved by City Council on this day last year. So I am incredibly proud to kind of reflect back on the incredible progress that our agency has made in a really short amount of time, and really grateful for the opportunity to share our work with you. So let me tell you a little bit more about DCASE. So we are officially the local arts agency for the city of Chicago, which is the third largest city in the country. We support artists and cultural organizations, we invest in the creative economy, and we work to expand access and participation in the arts throughout Chicago's 77 neighborhoods. We do this as a collaborative cultural presenter, arts funder, and advocate for creative workers, and we seek to do programs and events that embrace Chicagoans as well as visitors to our city, both in our downtown core and increasingly more in neighborhoods throughout our city, to strengthen and celebrate Chicago. So one of the things that I did is with my team is we created this new mission statement, and so it's only about 6 months old. But we thought that it was important to craft a mission that better reflected who we were as an agency today, and also the agency that we wanted to become. And there were two things that we needed to communicate in this messaging. One, arts are everywhere. And it's our responsibility as an agency to both foster that and to meet that where it is. And that two, the arts are at work in Chicago, at work to strengthen quality of life for our residents and our city overall. So I just do want to do a little bit of a temperature check around COVID and the cultural sector. Of course, everybody knows that the cultural sector was absolutely upended and devastated by COVID-19. But arts and culture are incredibly important, right, economic and tourism drivers for our city. And in Chicago in 2015, we had about 85,000 creative workers. We were generating billions and billions in revenue for the city and for the state. But over the pandemic, we had 2 years, right, where essentially our creative organizations and cultural venues were completely shuttered, which then catalyzed, right, massive layoffs. At some point in time, we were looking at 80% unemployment, which is staggering and scary. We've done a lot to stabilize that, but there's still an incredibly long road to go, and I cannot say that more clearly for people who care about culture. Our organizations are still looking at like 30 to 50% loss in operating revenue. Which brings us to Art 77. So in 2001 of last year, we launched Art 77 as our kind of arts reopening and recovery plan. There are three main sections to this. One is expanded access and participation in the arts citywide. Two is the prioritization of employment of creative workers through city programs and services. And three is deepening public sector investment in the creative sector. I'm going to show you some of the initiatives and programs that you're working on. You'll see that we really, although these are kind of separate buckets, we kind of try to go across all three to really make a successful program. We're deeply committed to data. Equity is at the center, right, of every decision that we make. And I think most importantly, if I can give anybody a kind of advocacy call at the end of this, is that our governments must show up to bring real dollars and real investment to the creative sector if we're going to achieve any of these goals. And I'm really proud to announce that Chicago, since we launched Art 77 in April 2001 of last year, has dedicated over $100 million in new resources to support arts and culture in our city. Thanks. So just to kind of dive a little bit deeper into expanding access in the arts. So when we launched Art 77, we started announcing new guidelines to help the creative sector reopen. We opened up new funding opportunities and programs to increase access and to reopen the cultural sector. And one of the programs that I want to highlight is Culture in My Neighborhood, which is actually a partnership between DCASE, my agency, and the Chicago Public Library System and the Chicago Park District System to really help increase access and deliver high quality programs. not every community has what we call traditional arts and culture infrastructure. So they don't have museums, they don't have theaters, they don't have galleries. That doesn't mean that culture's not present, right? So we have to think about how to support culture more broadly. And as we try to develop those kinds of assets, we as a government have the opportunity to look at the civic assets that we control, right? And think about how we can repurpose those for culture. So with Culture in My Neighborhood, we took $40 million in capital investments to put into our parks and libraries to transform these facilities, which are networked and in every community throughout our city, into cultural destinations, right? So we rebuilt stages, we upgraded lighting and tech systems so that the community now can really utilize these assets. And we're also going through a community-led visioning process so that communities can also help us determine how to, once these spaces are transformed, really utilize these spaces for community use. The second one is creative workforce. So this is about how we develop programs that are designed to recognize the talents of artists as creative problem solvers that can help address issues of critical importance to Chicagoans. I wanted to give you this slide, again, just to re-emphasize that data is really, really important to the arts and culture sector. This is some data that is from a recent study by the University of Illinois at Chicago around equity and arts earnings. As you can see, right, there's a discrepancy among arts earnings for artists, individual creatives, across race and ethnicity and gender. This is probably no surprise to any of us, right? But it's just an important reminder as we go forward developing these programs that we need to keep these systems in mind to ensure that the systems that we're developing are equitable across the board. One of the ways that governments can go about integrating the arts throughout is through what we call artist in residence programs. And we're doing this in cross-government in lots of different ways. We're working with the Department of Planning and Development, where artists are leading the engagement process around the We Will Chicago plan. It's the first comprehensive planning effort that our city has done since 1967. This will help ensure that the arts are infused throughout. We also have an artist in residency program with the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. This is an opportunity to think about access for that community, both in terms of how we create programs and how we support those artists. And we created an inaugural artist in residency program within a library space. When we renovated that library, we created an artist studio. And Alexander Antoine was our first artist in residence, and she's been working the past 2 years with the community to develop programs that better connect residents to library services and also to ultimately end up developing public art and beautification projects for the neighborhood. In addition, I wanted to show you this image just to say that artists can also have agency across government in helping to facilitate policies that are not art-related. So this is an image by a muralist and artist, Sam Kirk. She worked really closely with us in 2021 and the National Alliance of Domestic Workers to create this visual campaign that ran alongside a number of policy and legislative reforms that we put out to help support and advocate on behalf of domestic workers. So the tools that artists can provide in helping to communicate and provide energy and illustration around the policy work that we're doing across government, I think can be really powerful. The other huge area of growth for us is in public art. Public art is actually like my core specialty. And we also received $15 million through the city's capital plan. We're doing a number of kind of artist-led engagements at this moment to help determine how those investments will be spent. We're spending the majority of those dollars on our South and West Side neighborhoods. And in Chicago, the South and West Side neighborhoods are historically Black and brown communities. They are the most disinvested parts of the city. And so we have a citywide initiative called Invest Southwest, where all of our city departments are marshaling resources towards 10 communities on the south and the west sides of the city. And arts is a core strategy behind that. So we've hired artists to really lead this kind of artist engagement process where we're listening, we're creating awareness around the value of public art and types of public art that people can see in their communities. We're creating some visioning with them in terms of what they'd like to see. And we're actually creating public art plans for each of these communities that we will be developing and implementing in the next 2 years. In addition to our communities, we've also expanded partnerships with our Department of Aviation. So we received a $3.5 million allocation with the expansion of our T5 International Terminal. And with that $3.5 million, we're actually leading the largest single acquisition of work by Chicago-based artists in the last 30 years. This is just a rendering of a work that we're going to be commissioning by a photographer, Jonathan Castillo, who documents businesses that are run by immigrants. And the work will be installed in the baggage claim. And we're hoping, right, that as visitors to our city come and pick up their luggage and get ready to embark on their journeys to Chicago, that this installation will also encourage them to support small businesses and to explore our communities a little bit deeper. Last but not least, again, is this kind of idea of deepening public sector investment. So the city will invest in short-term grants and funding programs that are critical to recovery, along with long-term cultural policy interventions that stabilize and grow Chicago's creative and cultural sector. Last year, with our 2022 budget, we saw a transformational influx of resources to DCASE, primarily to support the work of our cultural grants program, which took it from $2.7 million, which is paltry, right, for the third largest city in the country, to $12.7 million, which was a big jump. In addition to that, we did receive funds from the American Recovery Act, about $16 million. And so we've really been able to put those funds to good work to expand the reach of our grant program. Last year, I guess this year, it's still 2022, we gave out 630 grants, which is a 25% increase from previous years. And you can also tell this is a chart that outlines demographic details for our IAP Individual Artist Program grantees. We're one of the few governmental agencies that provide direct grants to artists. It's incredibly important that we get those funds directly in the hands of artists. We don't need them to give them to organizations to have them trickle down. Get those funds directly in the hands of artists so that they can do the work that they do. But you can see from this that we're doing really well on our equity metrics. And from 2019 through to 2022, we've actually increased the number of artists that identify as BIPOC. So in 2022, 60% of our individual artist program grantees were BIPOC as compared to 38% in 2019. This is also a graph that basically shows the geographic distribution of our cultural grants. You can see in 2019, grants were primarily clustered in the sort of downtown and north section of the city. But in 2022, you can see that we're getting a much better geographic distribution of grants to that critical south and west side communities. And that's happening basically because of a couple of different reasons. One, we have the data to tell us what organizations are theoretically eligible for our programs. So we can go in these particular neighborhoods and we can create direct grassroots outreach programs to try to reach and encourage those applicants and eliminate barriers to access. But we're also doing something incredibly important in terms of the eligibility for our grant programs. Again, not all communities have traditional arts and culture infrastructure, but that doesn't mean that arts are not happening. So we've expanded the eligibility criteria for some of our grant programs to include community and social service base, as well as religious institutions that have cultural missions outside of their religious ones. And with those grant programs, we see that 90% of our applications and grantees are on the south and west sides of the city. So I'm going to leave that there and actually just turn it over to a video. I'm going to give kind of closing remarks to an individual artist who is actually a recipient of one of our grants. I can't say it better than they can in terms of how all of this is impacting culture in our city.
Hello, my name is Ayako Kato. My pronoun is she, her. I live in Ukraine village. My current project is Ethos project, and I'm creating Luca Res Communis Ethos Episode 3 at this 27-acre park. Gradually, I started to find out who I am and what's in myself. It took a long time, but that was the biggest challenge and moment in my dance life. I love Chicago because the dance community in Chicago is very nurturing for me and very much supportive for me. This award means to me that I noticed somebody care about what I'm doing, and I appreciate it so much. Also can do what I want to do through this Ethos project, and so much freedom I receive by getting this award. Thank you, Chicago. Thank you for the Esteemed Artist Award.
So that's it. I just want to thank you all again for having me here and for listening. Please encourage your legislators, encourage your elected officials. Arts is something that we need to plan for, like we plan for public safety, like we plan for roads and bridges. The arts are absolutely essential to our quality of life and to how we relate to one another and how we relate to ourselves. So thank you so much.